Hey, what's up, my friends? It's Thunderbob here, and tonight we are going to be discussing the Silent Hill 2 remake. I've always had kind of a passing interest in Silent Hill, but I've only spent a few minutes messing around with the series, playing at a friend's house in my youth, and more recently messing around with the series in emulators. And Silent Hill 2 Remake came out. I was really curious about it, and I just didn't play it. I had an idea to replay the entire Resident Evil franchise, and I did that over the last year or so, and I've got reviews for every game in the series. And after finishing that, it made me think I should go back and check out some other survival horror style games, and that brought me back to the Silent Hill franchise. So I'm playing this for the first time. This is literally the first game in the series that I've really put any substantial amount of time into. So before I started, I kind of did some research on, where's a good starting point for the series? Should I go back to the original? Should I play the remake? And it seemed like most everyone liked the remake, and it seemed to be a lot more accessible, staying pretty close to the original in spirit, but updating the gameplay and adding some quality of life, while keeping the story and the script nearly identical to that original game. So that's what I did. I jumped into the remake, and I might go back and play the original games, or if Bloober does another remake, I'll definitely check that out. And what do I think about the Silent Hill remake as my first Silent Hill game? Quite honestly, I was impressed by it. It was also a lot different from what I was expecting. The storytelling and the emotional depth really blew me away. The artistry and the design of the world is quite unmatched in the genre. And going from, the normal world to the otherworldly, monstrous areas, it's quite breathtaking and horrifying at the same time. The monster designs and the otherworldly creatures are really fear-inducing. Perhaps the only weak point of the game, to me, is the gameplay, which I thought was a little too simplistic. Mostly compelling and kept me entertained until the last couple of hours, but we'll get deeper into that. So let's start out with the story, which I think is maybe the most impressive part of the game. It's presented here really well. It's one of the best I have experienced in this genre. I'd say it's a lot less silly. It takes itself a lot more seriously than any of the Resident Evil games that I've played. It's on par with something like The Last of Us or Alan Wake 2 as far as, taking itself seriously and giving a little bit more kind of grandeur to the experience. Not to say it's better than Resident Evil, it's a different type of thing. Resident Evil is a lot pulpier and sillier, but I liked what this game did.
Silent Hill.
It's a very simple story with James Sunderland wandering into Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife, who died 3 years before the start of the game. And during the game, you meet just a couple of people in Silent Hill, including Angela, an abused young woman, Eddie, a bullied, overweight young man, Laura, a young orphan, and Maria, a woman who closely resembles your dead wife. And it seems that Silent Hill is kind of a nexus for those dealing with grief, abuse, trauma, and each character has unresolved emotional damage that has brought them to and trapped them inside of Silent Hill.
What?
And the scares here are much more psychological rather than strictly horror based. While there are monsters in the game, most of the enemies are some kind of mutated creature related to the trauma of those trapped inside. Much of the scares are related to the atmosphere, the themes, and the tone of the game, rather than simply being jump scared. And the game tells a really dark and disturbing tale full of mature themes that has a very satisfying ending without spoon-feeding everything to you. After beating the game, I went back and watched some comparison videos to the original, and it's really amazing how close the script to the game aligns with the original, but the new voice acting and animation adds a ton to make it feel more modern and realistic, and it really shows that the original game was ahead of its time in a lot of ways, and it presented a really dark and mature story on the PlayStation, on the original PlayStation, which, go back and play a lot of those games, and they do not stand up to the test of time like Silent Hill does. Let's talk about kind of the look, the design, the sound, performance. I really like the way this game looks, from the nearly photorealistic areas to the disturbingly dilapidated mirror versions of them in the Otherworld section. The enemies also have some of the best horror designs I've seen, and are absolutely terrifying the first time you encounter them. And the few bosses here are equally well designed, and the iconic pyramid head is intimidating and panic-inducing. Perhaps my only complaint is with the performance. I was playing on PC, and my system is a couple years old. I actually just ordered a brand new computer, but it won't be here for a few days. So I'm running a 3080 currently, which is, it's a couple years old, but I would say it's probably above average for a gamer. And it was very difficult to reach an acceptable performance level here. Even turning off ray tracing, lowering the settings, I could never get a constant 60 frames per second. And the game appeared to have constant stutters, even lowering the settings and the resolution kind of as far as they would go. You'd still get occasional stutters, which is kind of endemic to the Unreal Engine. I do want to mention the sound design also. I was very impressed with everything, from the music, from the returning original composer, to the ambient sound effects, to the horrifying noises the monsters elicit. The sound design is all top-notch. Also, I have to really commend the radio chatter that alerts you to nearby enemies, which is really an amazing addition to the genre, which was brought back from the original PlayStation game. And I want to talk about the gameplay as well. This is maybe the weakest point to me. I thought it was okay, but very repetitive. The remake has nearly doubled the playtime of the original game by expanding a few of the areas and adding more exploration, with new puzzles and more emphasis on combat and fewer unavoidable encounters. The issue is that they really have not built out the combat in a meaningful way to keep it fun for the considerably longer playtime. There's all of 4 weapons in the game, and I think 6 enemy types if you count all of the variations and bosses. They have expanded and improved the combat from the original, but it's still very limited. You've got a dodge move now, which you really have to use pretty frequently against the enemies. You've got, a much more responsive melee weapon. You've got the guns and everything. But in the end, I found the combat overall pretty easy, maybe too easy on the normal difficulty, and I spent the majority of the game just using my melee attacks to defeat enemies outside of the bosses. In fact, I didn't even fire my gun a single time until the first pyramid head encounter, 3 hours into the game. By mid-game, I had dozens of healing items and hundreds of bullets, but I never really found the encounters where it was necessary to use all these resources, and I found myself pretty bored of the combat before reaching the end. Now, I do have a lot of experience in the survival horror genre, and maybe that made this a little too easy. Maybe I should have started on the hardest difficulty, but, I always thought Silent Hill was a little bit tougher game, and I did not find that to be the case here. I also want to mention the puzzles have been remixed in the remake, with nearly everyone being rebuilt or modified from the original. For the most part, they're challenging but not frustrating. As someone coming from the Resident Evil franchise, I appreciate the care put into them here. Some are very trial and error, but most follow a sane, internal, kind of dreamlike logic. There's also kind of a feeling of an old point-and-click adventure game, where you find a ton of objects and you need to figure out the correct locations to use them. And early on, this was pretty simple. Later in the game, I was juggling a half dozen objects, and I'm constantly consulting my map to try to figure out where they're used. Towards the end, I was getting a little bit burnt out by the backtracking across some of these larger buildings, which is exacerbated by the really plodding and methodical running pace of the main character. I never really felt that playing the original Resident Evil games, but here I was kind of getting tired of running back and forth in that really slow pace that the main character always has. And really, there were just some areas that felt a little bit too long. You have so much backtracking through an area, and then you end up doing it a second time when the area becomes the otherworldly version. Overall, the game isn't long by your typical game standard, but it's long for a survival horror game. I prefer my survival horror games, especially the really terrifying ones, to be on the shorter end. The scares start to lose meaning when they start to recycle the same encounters over and over again. The exception of this is, Resident Evil 4, which really leans into the combat and the action and has some of the best combat in the genre, but here there's just not enough gameplay to stretch out the game to its length. And overall, I felt like the gameplay could have been improved further. After the first few hours, you've basically experienced everything the game is going to throw at you, and then you just repeat it for 8 more hours. My final playtime was about 12 hours, and I feel like you could shave off a few hours, and it would probably be a better game for it. So in the end, I was largely impressed by Silent Hill 2, and I am kind of eager to check out more games in the series, but I felt like certain aspects of it fell a little short. So I was very impressed by the story and the atmosphere, but the gameplay came up a little bit wanting. The game was also quite scary and unnerving, and I found it scarier than just about any of the Resident Evil games except maybe 7 or Resident Evil 2 Remake. The difference is Resident Evil is more survival horror, and Silent Hill is more psychological horror, dealing with trauma and pain more so than managing your resources. As the game progresses, it gets darker and darker, and the character delves deeper, literally jumping into hole after hole. This game has an obsession with holes. In a Dante's Inferno-like exploration of the main character's psyche. And it's never quite made clear if the events are real or just one man's guilt manifesting around him. So in the end, I'm glad to have played this. I'm eager to check out other games in the series, and I really hope that more of these games get remade. And, you know, Konami seems with Silent Hill F to actually be interested in releasing new games. So this is a series that I plan to explore more, and if I play more, I'll do some reviews, maybe a whole ranking down the road, just like I did with Resident Evil. And yeah, I definitely enjoyed my time with this, and if you are interested in Silent Hill, the remake is a great place to start out for a newbie. So I'll end it there. I do want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and just have a great night, everybody.